Trespassing in the kingdom of fear. I'm trespassing in the kingdom of fear. What the hell am I doing here? How much longer until I'll be shot by someone who mistakes me for a deer, or by a hunter for hunters, as they call creatures like me? I need to get out of here before the river floods, but the only open path is a descent into madness. And since I don't like retracing my steps, perhaps that's where I'll go if I survive the journey. D wrote, and grasped once more for the absinthe in the little brown bag on the floor of his car. Let's end it the responsible way of knocking yourself out with some Bukowski poems and booze. Dee thought, and searched around for the candles he had once purchased. He couldn't find them, but instead he suddenly held a touchscreen in his hands that not only had battery life, but also was connected to some sort of communications network that enabled him to write his former flatmate Jay and his partner in crime, who had once illustrated a reading of his with digitally animated paintings that were being projected all around him in a tiny movie theater in the East. He told him that he had gotten the vague order to write something for a local newspaper and asked if they wanted to draw illustrations. To his surprise, the old hacker replied almost immediately, "Yeah, sounds good, we'll get on that. By the way, we should probably tell you that we did that reading with you and captured you inside a digitally animated, simulated reality. You thought you were leaving the cinema that night, but actually all those things you've perceived since then have still been projections, designed by a little computer program I wrote." But back to the original point. Of course, we can give you some illustrations for your little article there. In this animated reality, you're the main character after all. And we want to see the main character happy after all. Don't we? We'll be in touch. Jay. Dee stared up from the screen with terror and stared into the darkness in front of his car for a while. The view calmed him down and made him forget that terrible gibberish that was spewing out of his machinery. Or rather, the lack of a view, since you could no longer see the sign proclaiming "No parking" in the dark of the night. He searched for a candle once again. And when he wound up empty-handed, he crawled into the back of his van and tried to get some sleep. Soon, he slipped into dreams of signs and screens that was utterly confusing, yet strangely entertaining to his unconscious mind. Dee was awoken by the thunderous roar of a private jet that was flying at an incredibly low altitude right above him, from the mountains in the north towards the city of Aspen in the south. Aspen, Fat City. The inevitable next stop on his quest to capture the culture of this part of the country. If he could get his car to work again. If he would ever make it out of this place alive. Before doing anything else, he had no choice but to walk up the road in order to catch a glimpse of Owl Farm. Preferably without triggering any spring guns that may or may not still be installed up there. Dee put on some clothes and crept out of his car in order to head up the hill. On his way, he got the touchscreen out of his pocket that miraculously still had battery life. He reread the surreal message from his friend Jay he had gotten last night and once again racked his brain about what all of this was supposed to mean. Then he shrugged it off and walked on. After all, that was an almost inescapable fact of life in this century. Every once in a while there were screens in your vicinity spewing mystifying nonsense sent to you from the other side of the globe. Suddenly another one of those haunting messages appeared in his screen. Unfortunately, this one made a little more sense. It was from his friend G, reminding him that he would have to pick her up at the Los Angeles International Airport in a few days. God damn it. He had to reach that former farm of Thompson's. He had to get to Aspen and then on to Denver, and then he'd have to get back to the West Coast in a desperate, strung-out battle against time. He had to see all those monuments of American culture and come up with some sort of final wisdom in a matter of days. Buy the ticket. Take the ride. The doctor's disembodied voice cried out through his earphones. But when he got the touchscreen out of his pocket again in order to check the map, the diabolical machine died on him again. And this time, it seemed to be final. Dee wandered aimlessly through the mountains, trying to remember which way to go. Suddenly a white car drove down the narrow road before him, and when it passed, he could read the word sheriff on its side. He decided to retreat to the log cabin down the road, where he recharged his phone and grasped for one of the books on the shelf in order to reassure himself in his mission. He began to read the article a young Hunter Thompson had written on a deceased author he had admired in his day, and on his visit to the town of Ketchum, where Hemingway had lived and died. With silent joy, Dee reread Thompson's description of the late writer's empty house. A comfortable-looking chalet with a big pair of elk horns over the front door. It is built on a hillside, looking down on the Big Wood River and out across the valley at the Sawtooth Mountains. With newfound conviction, he got up, and when he saw that the little touchscreen with the map was operating again, he decided to walk out into the mountains once more in order to see how much Thompson's old home resembled his description of Hemingway's retreat. On his way up into the hills, he kept thinking of the article's final words.